Okay, so if everybody says you acknowledge that, then we'll be in business. Okay. So John has just a few things you'd like to tell the Wildflower Society members, please. Yes, good plan. I'm going to mute everybody else, and I'll mute even the people that are going to speak. So you'll have to unmute yourself, and I'll probably try to turn off the videos if you've got them too. So, John, you'll have to unmute.
Yeah.
I think. Okay. Okay. John, would you like to begin?
Yeah, you can hear me good?
Yes, I can. Yep.
Okay. Well, those of you who have been in the society for numbers of years will know that we used to have what we used to call the Christmas slideshow every year at, oddly enough, Christmas. But since the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, we've moved it further down the calendar. Some of that I think was because of the light shows and stuff. So every year we ask members to send in their interesting photographs for inclusion in a PowerPoint presentation that I make up. And as far as, well, 20 minutes ago, myself and Karen talking, we'll probably use the slideshow as our February meeting. So the problem is always getting people to send their pictures in, because everybody has good intentions and the time flies and there's lots of things to do. But if possible, please try and get your pictures sent in to me by Christmas Eve at the latest. I'll send something out, a bit more specific. This is just sort of like a first heads up. And so if we can look to sort through all of our nice pictures and have them into me by Christmas Eve, New Year's Day at latest, but I'll say Christmas Eve. And then I'll try and put the show together. And for those of you that aren't really familiar, we're not asking for like absolutely, Life magazine, as they used to say, quality pictures or National Geographic pictures. We're looking for stuff that's interesting to you and kind of cool, and stuff you might like to share with people of your experiences for the last year or so, and I'll see what I can put together. So, and I guess there's not much more to say. Just get starting to sort through your stuff and try and get them into me.
John, can I ask if there is, you're asking for a maximum, or, so there.
I'll send something out.
Okay.
Usually it's around 15, but
okay.
About 15, but I'll send something formal out. But we'll just take this as a sort of a heads up and get started and sorting and thinking about stuff. And I'll try and get something out within the next week or so. So that's about it.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'll just say one more thing for those people that haven't sort of seen the shows that I've been putting together. I think they're all on the website, the society website, I think, for the last few years anyway. Is that correct, Karen?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll send something more formal out.
Okay. I seem to have lost Michael Brzezinski.
Oh dear.
There, here he's coming. There you are. Yay.
Still around. Still around.
Okay. Good. Michael, would you like to just give us a few words about Andrus?
Sure.
please.
Most of you know Andres, so you'll understand how difficult it is to summarize his accomplishments. Dr. Andres Voigt, a thoracic surgeon, and his wife Maria arrived in the province in the year 2000 and soon decided to retire and live here. Anne and I met Maria and Andres around 2001, and we've shared many great adventures with them in the years since then. Andres is focused and dedicated and completely tireless, and in his retirement, he decided to concentrate on natural history and photography. Began to seriously explore an early interest in mushrooms, and almost by chance started the event that's become the annual mushroom foray of Newfoundland and Labrador. That was started in the summer of 2003. 20 years later, the foray is still going strong. It's identified over 2,000 species of fungi and lichens in this province, and there are about 17,000 specimens now preserved in the fungarium at Munn Grenfell campus. Andres has also amassed a personal collection of thousands of specimens that he's identified over the years. He's helped describe 18 completely new taxa and has had 2 new species named after him by other scientists. Although he started as an amateur, Andres is now one of the best-known mycologists in the province, a co-author of many scientific publications with world-renowned experts, and a spokesman who has aroused interest in mushrooms and in nature in general. He's the most active and productive naturalist in this province that I know of. If that's not enough, in 2006, Andres published the book Orchids on the Rock, Wild Orchids of Newfoundland, co-authored with Maria. He didn't stop for breath. In 2007, he published a little illustrated book of common mushrooms of Newfoundland and Labrador. In 2010, he founded, wrote most of the articles for, and produced the foray journal called Omphalina, which Microweb has described as the finest amateur mushrooming newsletter in North America. This summer, Andres published Oliver's Guide to Bumblebees of Newfoundland, co-authored with Maria and with entomologist Barry Hicks. Andres and Maria donated the profits from all 3 books to support the Gross Moen Cooperating Association and its future publications. In 2015, Andres received the Tuck Walters Award from Nature Newfoundland and Labrador for outstanding and enduring contributions to the advancement of natural history and protection. And in the same year, he received the Garry Award for contributions to amateur mycology from the North American Mycological Association. And this year, on October the 4th, Lieutenant Governor Judy Foote awarded Andres the Order of Newfoundland and Labrador, this province's highest honor for his work in mycology and natural history. So congratulations, Andres. Even if you're not here, it's been an amazing run.
Thank you, Michael. It sure is. Absolutely wonderful.
I don't even know if they can see you in that.
Thank you.
Because I have no idea what's.
Okay,
But,
and
Well, it's not muted now.
see who this is. Okay,
Switch to microphones.
sure who that is. Okay, well, Todd, would you unmute yourself and
Sure.
yeah.
All right. Good evening, everyone. It's my great pleasure to introduce our speaker this evening, Meghan McCarthy. She has been working with me now since a year ago, last May. So it's absolutely wonderful having her. And I have to say, with the Light Festival, she's a huge burden taken from me, because she can take care of the garden now, put it to bed for the winter when I'm otherwise occupied saying ho, ho, ho. All right. So Meghan has an undergraduate degree from Munn. She's originally from Newfoundland. And then she moved up to BC, up to the Victoria area, where she got her Red Seal in landscape horticulture. She worked up there from 2016 to 2019. Then she moved back to Newfoundland, started working for Aero Landscaping. So you may have seen their signs on various lawns around the city. And she worked with them from 2019 to 2022. And then, as I mentioned last May, she started work at the Botanical Garden. So one of her things that she did while she was in Victoria, she sort of worked with a number of different landscaping companies, but also had her own company dealing with native plants. And so this evening, she's going to sort of highlight that aspect of her previous life by talking about the Garry oak,
I've lost you. I've lost Todd. No sound.
You got me there now?
Yep.
Everything there.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. I'm not sure what happened. With my muting, but so be it. I never touched anything. Anyway, so I'm not sure at what point did you lose me?
Maybe not.
Couple of
Three,
triple
and
lines.
I'll get it the next time.
Okay, so
It's like
Ava
repeating the
Musso,
recording.
you need to mute yourself
I
because
can
we can
even
hear
see
you
it all
chattering
the
in the
time.
background. Thank you.
Because
And yeah, so anyway, like I said, one of
if
Meghan's
they can
jobs that she
hear me,
did when she was on her own
no,
over in Victoria was doing some work with native plants. And that's what she's going to talk to us this evening about. So I'll pass it over to you, Meghan.
Great, thanks, Todd. I'm gonna share my screen now. See if that works okay. One sec. Okay, can you see that okay?
Yes, we
Yep.
can, Megan.
Okay,
Looks good.
perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me, folks. I'm first time caller, but big fan, I guess. It's a good way to put it. And thank you for that lovely introduction, Todd. That's very nice. So, okay. Yeah, so in the, I guess, what was sent out in the email kind of said native plants of Vancouver Island and Garry Oak ecosystems, but there's quite a lot. And I was going through things that kind of, it's very easy to tumble all over the place. So I'm gonna focus on Garry Oak ecosystems. And I guess, but it's not always cut and dry, I guess. You know, whether as you know, there's many things kind of
Okay.
yeah, I
go
think
in and
that
out.
might be the best thing just to get out.
Karen, would you be able to mute Eva for me? Because she's still going there. That'd be great. Okay, so the distribution of this ecosystem that we're going to be talking about is this map here. So we can see Victoria is way down here, Vancouver is over here, and you have the Gulf Islands. So it's a pretty small distribution. And over on the left here is its distribution down into the US. So a lot of the times when we talk about Garry Oak stuff, like in BC, it's always very like dire and extreme because it is such a small makeup, but it is a bit more prevalent down through as you move more south. It's just, we didn't really talk about that a lot in school or when we were doing this sort of work. We were very like BC focused. And it is very specific to BC in terms of like when we're talking about invasive species councils or, you know, local laws and that sort of thing. So that's kind of more my background. And on the right here is a Garry Oak tree, and it's a Garry Oak meadow basically. And I'm gonna mostly be talking about meadows because they're the prettiest and the fanciest, but there's lots of woodland, there's lots of sort of in between ecosystems that we can talk about as well. And some of these are a little blurry for some reason, so I apologize. But this is the kind of star of the show, what this whole ecosystem revolves around, the Garry Oak. And it's very special and it's very distinctive. You know, when you're walking in the landscape, this tree really stands out to you. It's very Halloween-like. It gets very like craggy, and it has a very distinct shape. And it is special because it's the only native oak in BC. So there are lots of native oaks in North America, but this is the only one that is native to BC, which is great. So what was I going to say? yeah, so it can get to be 25 meters tall. And it's cool because it can grow in like very rocky, like almost bedrock. And it gets kind of like tuckamored with the wind, but it can also grow in these like big deep soils. So sometimes you'll see like on the left here, where it's really big and grand and majestic, but a lot of the time this is how you see it. So this is like a much different landscape. It's very rocky, and the trees are looking very Halloween-like here, and it's very scrubby, and so you can kind of imagine that like the this was obviously taken in the winter. Victoria winters are very different. Our winters, obviously, but when the spring comes and this is alive with happy flowers that want to get out and get back underground before the drought, that this would be quite a sight. Yeah. Okay, so this is kind of, and again, I don't know why this is blurry, but this is what, if you've heard of Garry Oak ecosystems at all, this might be what you picture. So like the big picturesque Garry Oaks in the background, and then a field of camas. And I guess we'll be talking about that for sure. But how, I guess what's special about Garry Oak ecosystems is how little of them are left. So they think that there's only like less than 1% of untouched Garry Oak ecosystems that used to be. So for example, like all of Victoria used to be Garry Oak, and now Victoria is there. So it was displaced. So there's many different reasons why it's in severe decline. So obviously urbanization and construction, that sort of thing, is one of them. Also the use of fire. So it's very much one of those ecosystems that revolves around fire. So what happens is if there's no fire, then the Douglas fir focused ecosystem and Douglas firs themselves start creeping into the Garry Oak landscape, which it's great for the Douglas fir and the grand fir, but not for the Garry Oak ecosystem. So even though when you go to Victoria or a lot of these places, you see a lot of green space, it's predominantly Douglas fir forest. So very different. And also oaks are really more sensitive than most to construction and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of effort now to like protect, but even so, like ongoing construction still seems to disrupt. We also have like the classic insect and invasive species combo. So I have a slide about invasive species later on, but they play a major role in the decline. The Victoria area has a really serious problem with invasive species, and they are very present in as a gardening, like our daily lives. And there's a lot of people that are working very hard to control that, but it's a really big issue, to the point where like things like Scotch broom actually like change the soil profile and chemistry. So there's a lot of that. And then things like historical overgrazing, because there are meadow and grassland. So it's easy to take something like that over for farming or that sort of thing. And then there's the oak itself gets attacked by a few things, jumping gall wasps and leaf. Oh, I never know how to say this word. Anyway, I'll skip over it. Anyway, it has some problems. So it gets attacked. And we used to call them widow makers because they will drop big limbs and stuff for no reason. So I should have put in the picture of, I was working on a property and it rained a lot. And the next day I went back there and an oak tree had fallen exactly where I'd been working a few hours after I left. Yeah, so it can be scary. So I want to just highlight, I guess, most of the presentation will be highlighting the key species or things that I think are really beautiful. It was really hard to choose, and it obviously, like, you know, thinking with the Wildflower Society, like what would be interesting, but the big thing to know about this ecosystem is how culturally relevant it is, and how special of an example of I guess ancient indigenous farming techniques. So when we talk about Camas, we can talk about like how beautiful it is, and how striking the meadows are, and but this plant was essential for the survival of First Nations people on Vancouver Island. It was an essential food source. It's a bulb, as you can see up here. And they would did like big picks in the sand and roast them. And they would also farm them. So we have on the left here, Great Camas, Camassia lectinii, and then on the right is Camassia quamish, so common Camas. And that and its relative, this here, Death Camas, when the leaves come up and if you're looking at the bulbs, they're really, really similar. So what they would do is when they're in flower, they would dig up all the Death Camas and chuck it over a cliff. So there's some spots in BC where you look over a cliff and it's just a field of Death Camas. So that was some of the early farming techniques. And they would also create like orchards of Pacific crabapple and that sort of thing. So it's really important, and it's considered kind of for a lot of groups, like a very sacred, like eating it and cooking it and taking care of this plant is really culturally important. And also we can grow this one here. So we grow lectinii at the garden. That's the one that seems to do the best. So if we want a little piece of that, you can have it. We're going to be planting a lot more of them this fall at the garden. So yeah, this is Death Camas. So obviously it looks really different than its cousin, but still really beautiful and has its place in this landscape. And then we have fawn lilies, so Erythronium oreganum. So you might know its, I guess, Ontario cousin, the trout lily. And we grow it at the garden. There, it has a yellow flower, and we might people might be growing this white flowered one here as well. I'm not quite sure, but it's called fawn lily because if you look at these, the leaf, it looks like a fawn's rump, I guess, or its new fur. And when you're up close to it, it really does look like it. And this is kind of a common sight to have these swaths of fawn lily or shooting star or canis, like in about like March or so, February. So it's really like if you can go, it's a very striking landscape with all those like really kind of like craggy oaks and just the swaths and swaths of wildflowers underneath them. And as you move from kind of like a forest into a meadow into like a rocky slope, it's really beautiful. So we have all those fawn lilies. And in the middle there, that's what it looks like close up. And when I said shooting star, so on the left here, that's Dodecathion hendersonii, shooting star. So that's another one we can grow Dodecathion here as well. But the numbers that you see in this ecosystem are amazing. And that's another reason I think why people are working really hard to like restore these ecosystems, because when they thrive, they're really, really beautiful. And the colors really go well together. It's like a piece of art. So we have like the purple of the shooting star, and then they'll often be mixed with the camas, and then the spring gold on the back, lomatium. Also, just as a question to the group, is Latin helpful? Because I can throw down some Latin, but if it's not, I don't have to. And it's a little rusty anyway, because like Todd said, it's been 4 years since I have worked in this Garry Oak world. So I apologize if some things are rusty.
I think Latin is good if you can put it in.
Sure. Okay, perfect. That sounds great. I'll have my little reminder sheet here, but Lomatium urticulatum is that spring gold. So these, the two on the left are bulbs, and they get a little bit taller, and the spring gold can stay like pretty small, like about there. And most of these are spring flowering because in Victoria, like it'll be rainy and it'll be rainy, and then it'll still be March and it'll still be raining, and then come like end of March, then it just won't rain again until September. So the drought can be pretty severe, and when they talk about Garry Oak's ecosystem specifically, they say it's maybe more suited to a changing climate because it can take drought really well, because pretty much all these plants go to sleep. So that's another people see as a drawback to this sort of ecosystem, because during the summer it's looking pretty crispy and there's not like as much going on. And Victoria is and I talk about Victoria mostly because I studied there for a long time, but it's pretty similar through the rest of the Pacific Northwest. You have very manicured gardens, and then you have native plant gardens, and there's a little bit more of a struggle between those two than there is here, between like the very manicured and watered lawn and then the meadow next to it, and fire hazards and stuff people have a problem with, which ironically, like fire was used so much to manage this ecosystem that like that ecosystem will be fine with fire, but people are afraid of fire, which makes a lot of sense. But anyway, so this is one of the combinations you see, and oh wow, this picture did not, sorry folks, that picture did not turn out very well, but you get the color idea. But I'm gonna move on from that one because I don't know what happened. And this is another combination. So you have a lot of camas, and then you have this Aquilegia formosa, the red columbine, which really just grows everywhere. And a lot of really nice native grasses as well, which I didn't really get into because the flowers are so flashy. But one of the biggest things when we would be doing meadow restoration is we would just take someone's front lawn and plant a lot of these like clumping grasses, and they would really hold down the fort in terms of the meadow, and then you at least have something when all the flowers are gone. Okay, so we have my little, on the left here, my chocolate lilies in a cage. So part of my business, which was, I felt very fortunate, was I had a lot of really keen clients who had native plant gardens, and they had been doing it a lot longer than I did. And they would propagate their own plants, and they would donate the plants to restoration projects. And a lot of them were really active in like invasive species removal. And they were very, very cool. So the one on the left here, these are some chocolate lilies, so Fritillaria affinis, that me and my client Pam propagated, and they eventually flowered, and we were very excited because this one is a bit tender in the wild. I didn't see it in the wild a lot, and you would only see like 1 or 2 plants. So when we got these chocolate lilies going, we were very excited. So this is one of my pictures, so it's not the best, but this modeling on the petals here is really distinct. And it's one of those plants that you would be walking along and you would almost stumble on it, but once you saw it, it was very exciting. So in the middle here, we have small flowered woodland star, which is in the saxifrage family. And sorry folks, I don't know what's going on with the pictures. Some of them are kind of blurry. So Lithophragma parvifolia. And you can kind of see a bit of a trend here with, some pretty long stalks. And on the right here, this is Alyssium douglasia, or satin flower. And this one was one that I planted myself because I had a cool project to do a birds and butterfly, mixed hedgerow and garden. And when this actually flowered, I don't know why I'm constantly surprised that when I plant things, they grow, but this was I'm pretty sure I did a happy dance. And then I went and got my clients and they did a happy dance. It was lovely. But I love this one. And this one, it only gets to be about that big. It's not very big at all. Whereas these chocolate lilies and the woodland star, they get a little bit taller. Okay. And this is one of my favorites. So this is called sea blush. And this is the type of plant that you'd be walking in a forest and there'd be a clearing and it would be covered with sea blush because it's an annual. So it kind of pokes up. It's a meadow plant as well, but it would be such a nice surprise. You'd see like a beam of light, like the light beamed the sea blush down. So this is Plectris congesta. And then there's other, So this is it with Menzies larkspur, Delphinium menzii. So they all kind of play together. And these colors are quite bright also in real life. I know some of these photos a little bit like Photoshop probably, but it is pretty striking how the colors go together. A lot of like purples and golds. So our little artistic brains like that. So yeah, that's sea blush. I love it. And again, it's pretty small. Like it doesn't, now if it's in a meadow, it grows a little bit taller. But a lot of these are pretty small. But this is probably the smallest of them all. And when you're looking at these pictures, they look pretty big. But really this is like about this big. You'll see like a rock face and from far away be like, oh, that moss looks purple. And then you go up and it's small flowered blue-eyed Mary. And this is a really, I don't know, I just think it's such a cool plant. It's so, the color is so striking. Like it truly is on the left. Well, in all the pictures, like that's really what it looks like in real life. I love it. And it's always a surprise because like I said, it's really small and yeah, just really special so this is more, it's really special to stumble upon it. So this is much more of, you wouldn't really see this in a meadow. You see this more on like the picture up here on the top right, because it kind of like grows in amongst the moss on a rock. So you'll see it in all these little nooks and crannies. You don't often see it like necessarily like in a meadow or like growing in soil on the ground because it's so small. It kind of gets easily lost. So that's Collinsia parviflora. The Latin is just not grooving off the tongue today. Yeah, so that's the sea blush and the Menzies larkspur again. So this native delphinium is not as tall as our as what we're used to seeing for delphinium. So you can tell by this photo that like the sea blush is maybe like this tall and the larkspur is maybe this tall. It does not get very tall, but it has that really, really pretty and really distinct blue color, similar to the delphiniums that we would know kind of in the same shade, but a bit darker and a bit more vibrant actually. So Yeah, really, really, really pretty and really easy to ID as a delphinium. Lots of really strong characteristics there. This is one of my photos that I stole from my best friend, who's a good photographer. You can see in the bottom. Okay. So here we're kind of moving into, we do have some meadow plants, but this one in the middle, I want to talk about. So this is licorice fern. And when we think about, I guess, like ephemeral plants or, you know, plants that kind of go to sleep before a drought sort of thing, you wouldn't really think of a fern. But this licorice fern will grow on banks, on rocky outcrops. Like this kind of growing out of a little hole in the rock is very typical for licorice fern. And it will take over huge swaths of area and be so lush and green and beautiful. And then it goes to sleep for the summer. I always thought that was really striking because I hadn't really seen a fern do that before. And, you know, it's not like a clumping fern, like a sword fern or something like that, you know, it kind of runs along. And then underneath it here is Sedum spathiifolium, which is one of my favorite ones. The rock, I don't know the common name, don't remember. But anyway, it's this very, very blue color. I probably should have put in a much better picture of it. But you'll also see that. So again, from far away, you'll be like, oh, that rock is a weird color. And it'll be growing all amongst this this moss. So the really crappy photo from earlier, for some reason, the blue, the low, really bright blue was this sedum, and it changes color in the fall. So it's really beautiful and really striking when, you know, there's not a lot going on in the fall. When this guy starts to turn color, it's really something to see. And it's, again, like really numerous, like is everywhere, and it'll be growing with the moss and the blue-eyed Mary. And I'm not going to talk about moss, but moss plays a really important role in this ecosystem, which I think is interesting, you know, because of the role of the drought. But it's definitely, yeah, up close and personal. It's very important. And there's a lot of really nice ones. Okay. Oh, sorry. So on the left here, this is woolly sunflower. And this is one of my favorite meadow plants. It is super cheerful and has actually a really long bloom period. And it has a bit of a different shape from the rest of the plants around it. So it really ends up standing out, but it complements in terms of color. So that's Eryphyllum lanatum, I think. And then on the right here, we have Western buttercup. So there's a similar to here, there's a lot of native buttercups. And when you think of meadow, to me, when I think of meadow, I think of buttercup. But this Western buttercup ends up being a keystone species of the meadow. So that's Ranunculus occidentalis. But there's a few others as well that look very similar. But it's a little bit tough because just like here, the creeping buttercup is a really serious issue, and in the meadows and like woodland margins and pretty much everywhere. And so these guys, when we're doing like meadow restoration or native plant stuff, it's one of the first ones that people weed out accidentally, unfortunately, because they have their eye on the prize when it comes to eradicating buttercup. So this guy kind of gets a bad rap, and I feel bad because a lot of the time we would plant a lot of it and then it would be gone, or a neighbor would say, oh, your lawn is full of buttercup. And they didn't know the difference. So poor guy. Okay, so here is a success story that I wanted to share, because when we talk about ecosystems like this that are like super threatened, and they have a lot going against them. It can be a lot of, I guess, not negativity, but it can feel like we're not making any headway. But this is a success story, and I only really actually realized this recently, because when I was doing this work, it was still about 8 years ago, it was still very threatened. So a lot of good can be done in a short amount of time, if a lot of people are really working on it. So this is a golden paintbrush, Castelia Levesta. But the golden paintbrush is the way that we learned it, and it was, and probably still is, a red list, like by BC standard. So like extremely rare plant, and had been kind of targeted for conservation, because there was only about 10 populations. But it was really important for, there's certain butterflies that have associations with this plant. So they're kind of all going down together, which was really hard. So people have made a really concerted effort in the conservation world to help this plant. And so it went from 10 populations to actually 48 populations. And now there's over 300,000 of these plants, which definitely 8 years ago when I was doing this, it was very, very, very far from that number. So it's super exciting that we can have a win. I'm going to take the win, and I wanted to share the win with you guys because I thought who else would appreciate it. And this plant, and if you know other Castelia, or sorry, I never know how to say that word. There's a lot of reading and not saying this sort of thing, but yeah, they're small and bright and beautiful, and I'm very glad that they are coming back. Okay. So a lot of the time we'll talk about like most of these plants are bulbs. Well, not these guys, but we talk about the spring ephemerals, the spring bulbs, the really flashy perennials, but there's a lot of supporting actors that or other plants that you'll find either on the margins, maybe a little bit more in the Douglas fir side, but a lot of these plants also grow in amongst the Garry oak. So if you think of, there's maybe like a rocky outcrop, and then there's a little pocket of deeper soil, and the oaks like the rocks, but they also like the deep as well. But you're likely to find these. So what I always found interesting is something like snowberry, which I always thought of as just like a kind of boring, scrubby, like probably European plant, is actually a really important native plant in this ecosystem. It does run, and it's like very vigorous, but it's a main actor, and especially in a lot of these more like rocky spots, it can you can find a little pocket and hide in there. Then we have ocean spray, Holodiscus discolor, and this one up top, the Ribes sanguineum, the red flowering currant, culturally are both really important. So the ocean spray, when the ocean spray bloomed, it was a signal. So the ocean spray and the red flowering currant, when they would bloom, or when the blooms would start to fade, or when the plant was going through a certain, like when the leaves would change color, it was supposed to be a signal of like, oh, when the ocean spray blooms, that's when you hunt the salmon, or when the red flowering currant blooms, that's supposed to be when the hummingbirds return. So they had a huge cultural importance. And what I like about where I studied, the Pacific Horticulture College in Victoria, is we had a ethnobotany trail that had all these plants with their name in the WSÁNEĆ people's language and its use and its stories. And the red flowering currant kind of took a bit of a sideways path because when settlers came to Vancouver Island, they saw this plant and they fell in love with it, as many of us have. And then they took it and propagated it and took it all over the world, and it was sold all over the world. And that plant alone fueled tons of plant expeditions. So it's interesting to me that a plant that's really important for Indigenous people was then used for like colonial plant expeditions. It's very confusing. But yeah, very culturally important, but also again, big spring markers of spring. So this red flowering currant and this Bono one here, this Malaria cerasiformis, so it's Indian plum is the way that I know it. The plum is like the first thing that will bloom in the spring. And they have these little fruits which are edible, but 100% not palatable. It's one of the worst things I've ever tasted in my life. Yeah, so those guys are some of the earliest, and then the ocean spray is quite a bit later. And then the last one, I just wanted to share this gummy gooseberry. So this is actually taken at my client Pam's property. And that's not super common, but I loved it. It was a great little plant. And with a name like gummy gooseberry, you can't really go wrong. So you can kind of see in the background here some Garry oaks, and on the right in the background, that's some ocean spray once it's done flowering, and a bank of, the licorice fern. And I think some hairy manzanita in behind it as well, which I didn't take a picture of, but is also a really cool plant. Okay. So, and then we have more supporting factors. So I talked a little bit about the specific crabapple down below. So this is on the left here. So this would have been, you have like Garry oaks and you have grassland, and you would often have kind of cultivated orchards of this native crabapple, which I think is so cool. I hadn't really heard of people doing that because we don't really have plants like that here. But yeah, they've found like lots of like evidence of these cultivated orchards in Victoria, and there's still like small sections of where people have continued to do it. Yeah, and then above here we have Philadelphus lewisii, so mock orange, which we always think of as an ornamental, but in this ecosystem you see quite a lot of wild Philadelphus, and it does quite well, and it blends quite in. So blends right in. So I thought that would be cool to share. And then over here, we have Arbutus menziesii. So if you've ever been in the Pacific Northwest, you've probably seen this plant. It is called arbutus or madrone in the US, but we don't really call it madrona very much in Canada. But you will see, especially in the more coastal rocky outcrops, you'll see Garry oaks and arbutus growing in very similar spaces. They have to be close to the ocean. I want to say within like 20 kilometers or less of the ocean. They don't grow inland at all. And they have this very distinctive peeling bark and shape. So this one on the right is my favorite thing. So I used to walk on this stone pathway, and you can kind of see here how it's built with there's stones on the outside, and here's an arbutus just growing out of the stones, and then underneath it is that licorice fern. So they're just having a party on the side of this wall, and that's pretty typical for I wouldn't say that this is common, but they do kind of pop up. And it's interesting because the arbutus and the Garry oak are both known to have tap roots. What with the Garry oak, we're kind of lucky because it's easier to propagate them. But when we were doing when we would be planting them, because I worked really briefly with a native plant nursery called Satin Flower Nursery, and they would collect Garry oak acorns and propagate them and use them for restoration projects. And they would have to be planted out within 2 years because the taproot was so significant, and we weren't actually really successful with the arbutus, but the arbutus aren't really threatened, but they are protected though. Okay. And then we have some animals that rely specifically on this ecosystem. So it's interesting, the Garry oak, there's 40 insects that feed on only the Garry oak. That's their only source of food, native insects. And so that's just like one small glimpse into how important this one tree and this one ecosystem can be to the wildlife that live within it. So there's a group called the Garry Oak Ecosystem Recovery Team, and they do very specific restoration of this sort of ecosystem, and they mostly target plants, but they also target animals as well. So they're some of the animals that they've worked with is this bird on the right here. This is the western bluebird. And another one, I guess, similar to the golden paintbrush, is they've been working really hard to help the western bluebird because it was very threatened and it was having a really hard time. And due to the work of conservation groups, they have significantly raised the population of this bird. It still is, there's still a ways to go, but their efforts have seen some results. Here we have, and similar on the left here, this is the Taylor checker spot butterfly, and it has specific associations with some Garry oak plants, and so they've been working to restore that as well. Some other animals here, we have a Cooper's hawk, which same situation. Black-tailed deer, they're not threatened, but when we talk about kind of like keystone species or animals that were very, very common in this ecosystem, the black-tailed deer are one of them. Now, deer get a pretty bad rap in Victoria, but we can't divorce them from this ecosystem. And then we have that lizard, which I forget its first name, sorry. But you see them, they really like the rocks, the rocky outcrops, and so do this guy. So this is a snake, a baby snake, garter snake, that I found that's my truck tire there, and I have many videos of it sticking out its tongue at me. But anecdotally, snakes used to be a lot more common. And in the last, similar to, the reasons why the ecosystem is declining, the snakes are also declining. And they really like those rocky outcrops, the really warm rocks with a little bit of cover. And so they go hand in hand. I know not everyone loves snakes, but these are super harmless. They're pretty small. This one surprised me and then wouldn't get out from under my truck. But it's cool because this is again at Pam's property that had that really big Garry oak meadow and huge additional native plant garden. And I actually hadn't seen very many other snakes at any of my other properties except for Pam's, because she had a lot of rocky outcrop and she did everything by the book. So it was pretty cool to see that conservation in action. Okay. So like I said at the very beginning, invasive species play a really big role in this ecosystem, and a lot of, like, as a horticulturist there, a lot of my time was spent with managing invasive species. It's a really something that the province and lots of interested parties spend a lot of money trying to battle, and it's a really big problem. So these are some of what I'd say the top 4 worst ones are. So on the left is Scotch broom, the very famous Scotch broom, Cystis scoparius. And this one is probably the biggest and most nasty threat, just because of what it can do. So it is it's allelopathic. It changes the soil chemistry. It actively wipes out and threatens like meadow species. It moves super fast. It grows super fast. It seeds everywhere, and it's a real problem. And they do also have some gorse as well, but the Scotch broom is a really big problem. So it's actually cool. A lot of the schools will do invasive species removal. So there's a lot of times you would just see like children with loppers on the trail, and they would mostly go after the broom and the ivy because the Daphne is really toxic and this blackberry wants to kill you. So it was really cool actually to see how the schools would get involved, and they would go into their community and do like broom blasts, as they called them, and try to help, because if in this ecosystem, if people aren't actively doing broom blasts and that sort of thing, it just it very quickly degrades, which is a scary thought. So then we have the classic English ivy. I think we all know the impact that can have, but it is really spooky when you go into more Douglas fir type ecosystem. But again, these ones, they blend into each other, and ivy will grow anywhere, and just see the entire forest floor carpeted and all up the trunks of the trees. So really hard to see and really hard to remove because you can't rip it off the bark. So you just have to cut it, and you actually have to cut and leave an inch between the cuts because it will reform. Also dangerous, like where we would do removals, because it can collect a lot of bad stuff. So we would have to use a respirator sometimes if we're taking it off like a house or that sort of thing. Up top here we have Daphne laureola, which is so profoundly different than any Daphne you have ever met. It looks evil even just looking at it. It's super poisonous. And when you're removing it, we would always have to be careful. We would have to have the windows open in our truck, or like you couldn't really have it in a closed space because it could make you pass out with the vapors. Really not good, and gives Daphne a bad name. And over here we have Rubus americum, or Himalayan blackberry, or Armenian blackberry, but we mostly call it Himalayan blackberry. And it is a thug. Like these these canes, the canes can be like this thick. Like I've had to like too big for snips sort of thick. Those thorns are, it really does feel like it's it's a personal attack when you're trying to remove it, and it's just everywhere. It takes over huge amounts of space, and it can grow pretty much anywhere. To me, it's sort of our version of, it's not quite like Japanese knotweed, but it really can take up a lot of space. And it's difficult to remove because it is so thorny, and it regrows super quickly. So there's a lot of yeah, I've picked up a lot of this out of my skin. But these are the real threats. And like here in Newfoundland, when we talk about invasive species, it's a very, very different situation than it is here when we're talking about Garry Oak ecosystems. Like these are like active threats that are always moving in, and it always has to be managed. And a lot of effort is also put in by cities to make sure that people aren't like walking or otherwise disturbing. Like things like having dogs off leash is also a really big issue. So you have a lot of these parks that are working really hard on meadow restoration, and yeah, there's just a lot going on, and it can be really tough. But I did share some wins, so there's that. And sorry, I thought I had another one, but I guess not. Okay, so I think that's it for me. Just wondering if people had questions or concerns. Yeah, and sorry for being so rusty.
Okay. Oh, no, Megan, thank you. That's wonderful. I think we have so many questions. It's so very,
Great.
very different. If you would like, you could stop screen sharing,
Sure.
and then perhaps we could see people as they might want to ask or comment.
Sure.
Yeah, first thing, that was great. Actually, I have so many questions myself, but just want to ask, why couldn't you have dogs off leash? How would that threaten your Garry Oaks?
So a lot of, especially in the spring, and especially in meadow habitat, but also in the rocky outcrops, you have a lot of bulbs that have really tall stems and are really sensitive to disruption. You also have, like, more so in Douglas fir forest, but you have a lot of like trillium and things that really, like, if you pick them, they really, really don't like that. Or things like small flowered blue-eyed Mary that's like growing in this little patch of moss, and then someone hikes over it and doesn't see it, and that whole patch of moss is now on the ground. And you know, people in BC, they love their hikes and they love their dogs, and like I understand that because I love those things too, but it would be hard to watch, you know. And these are really, really busy parks too. We have like Beacon Hill and like Uplands, and you know, where it's getting a lot of traction. So trying to educate the public about you know, because for them it's just, they're just going for a hike in their neighborhood, right? But and also, like, especially in Beacon Hill Park, you know, there's a lot of suffering. There's a big homeless population, and there is always the struggle between having a very sensitive ecosystem and having people that are really suffering in a housing crisis. So yeah, there is a lot going on, but it's very easy to break those stems.
Okay,
It's the short answer.
Sure. Yeah, because I wondered if they were spreading invasive plant seeds or something.
Probably also that. Yeah,
That's it.
Scotch broom especially, it loves to
Yeah.
spread by seed. You know, or like a blackberry gets, you know, they step on a ripe blackberry and it gets crushed in your boot and then you're walking across. So a lot of them, like you'll see they're fenced off, and then there's like pathways to cut through them.
Megan, the meadows must be absolutely stunning when it's all in bloom, have to say. And I think the golden paintbrush is a real eye. It's a beauty. It's absolutely beautiful. Question I wanted to ask you is, I don't know if I heard it wrong. At the very beginning, you're talking about the Garry oak and its threat, and you mentioned the Douglas fir and fire. Is that because of the fires in BC? They're more damaged, and the Douglas oak then come in into their spot. I mean, I wasn't quite sure what you meant by that.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So, both naturally and with the help of Indigenous people, like this landscape has been managed. So they would do sort of like what I guess has been called like slash and burn, but they would use fire to control the landscape. So when they were doing that, you have that would keep the Douglas fir at bay. And because oaks, like the oaks seem to respond, I guess, a bit better to the fire. And grasslands are very used to being burned, and they recover quite well. So without that fire, now you have like essentially like Garry oak ecosystems in an urban environment, essentially. So they can't do the slash and burn as a technique.
Oh, okay.
And you're trying to protect Victoria essentially from a wildflower fire. But what that ecosystem actually needs is fire, because it helps balance like the forest and the Garry oaks. So without that fire, the forest is like, sweet, okay, we'll just keep growing, I guess. And they'll try to because a lot of the time you'll see, so in our like conservation area at school, we would have Douglas fir forest, and then a path, and then meadow. So the meadow isn't going to outcompete the forest, right? The forest, like you have a few, anyway, it's going to encroach in. Yeah, and we see that with other ecosystems as well, but it's just really, really easily seen with this one, I guess.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Just want to say
Karen,
that
you're
you-
muted.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Go ahead.
okay, sorry. Get that mute button is a tricky one. I was going to say, Megan, that you seem to have such good experience with helping people to grow native plants in their gardens. And I thought it was really interesting that people would get mixed up about the buttercups. Because we have a gazillion kinds of buttercups here, it seems, but most people don't plant them. So that when you were planting would confuse, I guess, anybody.
Yeah, and understandably, because again, they're in that mindset of like, I need to keep the invasives out, and creeping buttercup, like like here, is a huge garden weed. But I guess similar to here, like they still have a place and they deserve to be in that ecosystem, and they're not maybe as flashy and beautiful, but like neither are their bunch grasses, those are or like even probably like the nodding onions and stuff, they're they're not as flashy. So it took a lot of convincing for people to accept the ecosystem as a whole and not just want to have only camas, which I understand why they would want only camas, but that's not balanced, and that's not, I mean, maybe it's sustainable, I don't know, but yeah, it's not the only thing. Yeah.
I was just going to say thank you very much. I really enjoyed the show. I loved your photos, love the images, even this, slightly blurry. I thought the effect was actually really nice, and love the snake picture. And was that a little alligator lizard? Was that the kind
Yes,
of lizard that it
alligator
was?
lizards. That's what it
Yeah.
was. Yeah.
Yeah. They're really
Yeah,
neat.
sorry
Anyway,
about
thank you.
that.
I quite
Yes.
enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. And thank you for that name. Yeah, I definitely feel a bit rusty.
Wait till you get older when you get forgetting names. Just saying.
Yeah. Yeah, and I apologize. I wish I had more like good photos from like my own experiences. But also when you're doing it, you're just trying to get it done as well. Try to do as much as you can. But yeah, and I probably had like mud smear all over my camera at that point.
Oh, Carmel, you're muted. That's okay.
But the chocolate lily is native, and you
Yeah.
propagated it, and it did really well. But when you put it out, it doesn't survive. Did you say that? How come?
No, when we propagated it, it did really well. It just was not something that I saw in the wild a lot. So like when we would plant it, it would do well where we planted it.
Okay.
But it seemed like it was it might be like maybe it's a little bit more sensitive to like disruption, or maybe it was just like where I was going, there wasn't very much of it. Because I was mostly like specifically around Victoria. Like I didn't get to see a lot of the like that specific ecosystem up like more north. But yeah, it seems way more sensitive than like fawn lily and camas, and like they like yeah, they could take a little bop, but I think also they propagated a little bit easier, the other ones, than the chocolate lily. They were a little bit slower. But and I find that with fritillaria in general, that they take a while to naturalize. Maybe, yeah.
Beautiful plant.
Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, really like strange color combination. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Megan, of all the plants that you encountered when you were working there, what would be your favorite?
Oh. That's a good question. I think I have many favorites for different reasons. Like I really, really do love that small flowered blue-eyed Mary. I think whenever I would see it, it would bring me a lot of joy because it's so tiny, and the colors in the plant, but then it would be growing on like bright green moss. I really loved that. I love the sedum spathifolium because it's so blue, and actually we grow that here in the garden as well. And I love it, and how it changes color and has like bright yellow flowers. And so I was a little bit more like into, I guess, the more like rocky outcrop sort of plants, but I don't know if I could really, I don't know if I could really choose, but I mean, those ones are definitely up there. I put most of my favorites in here, but I did also forget the monkey flower. And that's the chickweed monkey flower. It's a little yellow, it's a funny little face, has a little red speckled landing strip. Really kind of a goofy plant. I forgot that one, but that's up there too.
Well, it was great. I don't know if anyone else has any questions or comments. Then I will say thank you so much. It's been wonderful to get a sense of the opposite side of our country and how things grow.
Yes.
And
if anyone ever goes out there, let me know and I'll give you all the good spots, because it really is worth, if you can go and see it, it is really special. And plus there's a million other cool gardens, so you give it a little bit.
And the time of year to go is not midsummer, I guess. It's maybe later in the spring.
Yeah, much earlier, yeah. which is, it's like the perfect time because it's still winter here, but it's spring there. So you can come back and then it's almost spring, sort of thing. But yeah, more like February, like March, sort of time, March, early or April. I may have forgotten that a little bit after.
Good time
I'll
for us
look
to
back
be
into that.
here.
Time is a blur.
Seeing Margaret come on reminds me, I was going to say that many of your photos, when they were a little blurry, they look like paintings.
Totally. Yeah.
Like Monet.
Beautiful watercolors, Megan.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going for, the artistic approach.
Oh, good job.
Yeah. But I don't totally know why they did that though. They looked really bright when I put them on there. But anyway, you get the gist. So that
We
works.
sure did.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Megan.
That was
Thank you, Megan.
very nostalgic.
Thank
You-
you.
It's lovely.
Indulging me.
Okay, good night, everybody.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you at the next
night.
one.
Megan, we have a little something coming your way.
Oh, thank you. That's
Thank you.
great.
All right.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Karen.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Karen.
Thanks, Michael.
You're welcome. Yes, thanks, Michael, Todd,
Todd.
Megan, especially.